What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pick Swap Media YouTube channel. My name is Sean Barnard. I'm back here with my guy, Jackson Lloyd, from the NBA Action Podcast with Jackson. So make sure to check out the first part of this episode in which we broke down our playoff power rankings. And in this episode, we will be getting into our NBA awards and all NBA team picks. So let's get into it.
Step back, Jay. Harden. Bullseye.
Sixers looking very focused in the second half. Maxey looking for more. He's got it!
Daniel House, little up and under on the lob, and then flies in with the emphatic one-hand jam.
Niang looking for more from outside. Bang, bang, George Niang!
Joel, the process heavy.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pick Swap Media YouTube channel. We are here. It is the start of NBA playoffs, and to get a little final wrap-up of the regular season and look ahead to the playoffs, we're here to knock out some end-of-season awards, some all-NBA teams, and a little playoff power rankings. So here with me to do that, I have Jackson Lloyd. He is at Jackson Lloyd NBA on Twitter, the host of the NBA Action with Jackson podcast, as well as an NBA writer for Roll Call Sports. So, Jackson, how you doing today? Appreciate you for coming on, and what's your excitement level for these playoffs coming up?
Through the roof, and thanks for having me on. Now that I'm here, I'm doing great, but just really excited to hit the ground running tomorrow with the afternoon games. I think that's the best part of the first round is it's every single time slot, at least on the weekends. I know it's different during the weekdays once they start staggering the start times and the matchups through the conferences and time zones, but that first weekend of playoff basketball, it's euphoric.
Yeah, totally agree. It's the same thing with like the first opening days of March Madness to me, when it's just like the nonstop basketball around the clock. There's nothing that beats it, and for all the hoops heads out there, that you just can't top it. So I'm very excited to get it underway. And before we get into the full playoff conversation, let's kick things off and dive into the NBA awards this year. So the NBA awards, more so than ever, it feels like a highly contested and highly talked about controversial issues, but we finally have reached the conclusion. The votes are in. So to kick things off right at the top, Jackson, who do you have for MVP?
Sorry if you hear my dogs barking, but for MVP, I went with Embiid. I'm a little bit biased in that declaration, but I just think if you look at what he did, everyone knows scoring title and the burden he has offensively. But defensively, I think it's got lost in the shuffle a bit that Philadelphia is a really, really, really good defensive team when he's on the floor. It's a night and day shift when he's off. I know that Paul Reed has had some good weeks, past few weeks, post All-Star break, really brings a terrific energy to him. And, of course, P.J. Tucker is kind of renowned for being a small ball five when needed. But the heartbeat of this team on both ends is Joel Embiid. And that's not to take away anything from Giannis or Jokic or Tatum. But I think that you look at this season, especially with the leap that the 76ers have taken. I know that they've always been a good team with Embiid, but to me, this truly feels like the best kind of unit that he's had. And he's the driving force in that. I think that a lot of the criticisms of him, say, for example, people say he can't play against double teams. I don't really understand that. He gets double teamed almost every time he touches the ball on the post. You would think that people treat him like he's not capable of playing against that, or that he's uncomfortable versus it. And I'm like, have you watched the 76ers? That's kind of how they feed off everything. Maxey playing off the catch, driving versus a rotating defense. Even Harden, he's getting a lot of good catch and shoot looks this year off Embiid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you hit the nail on the head for all of that. Joel Embiid is absolutely my MVP. I mean, 33.1 points, 10.2 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.7 blocks, shot 54.8% from the field this season. So career highs in points, field goal percentage, as well as tying his career high in assists. And I totally agree on all your defensive points. And even when you look at guys like Giannis, who of course has a heavy defensive burden as well, Giannis has other guys around him like Brook Lopez, like Drew Holiday, who are incredibly positive defenders and make a strong impact. I feel like Joel is much more of like the eraser as his role in making up for guys who, like Tyrese Maxey and James Harden, who are never going to be super plus defenders. So the way that he's able to impact on both sides, to me, it does go unnoticed or underappreciated at least. So I do think it's Joel Embiid's year. He deserves it. He's on a different level this year, and his processing to me is the biggest thing that's taken a stride forward. He's just a different guy on the way he's reading the game, and it feels like he's fully in the mode of like, whatever defenses are throwing at me, I'm going to find a way to beat it in the way that it hasn't been in years past. So I've been nothing but impressed by him taking his game to another level. And it looks like things are filtering in and trending towards him getting the award. So I will be happy when that is the case. And shift to number 2 here, we have Defensive Player of the Year. So this one a little more open than the MVP. Who do you have for Defensive Player of the Year?
So I've noticed that my pick was really against the grain, which I try not to be too divisive or hot take in my nature, but a lot of the votes that I saw on Twitter through like the vote tracking Google sheet that they have were for Mobley or JJJ. I went with Bam, and I was kind of going to piggyback on this point. I tend to give players that are in Bam's case, it's not necessarily a lone big, but for Embiid, a big sticking point with kind of my evaluation of his defense is that he's the only big in his lineup. He doesn't have another all-league defender next to him. Like the Cavaliers, they have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. The Bucks, they have Giannis and Brook Lopez. Even the healthy Grizzlies have Steven Adams, and obviously Triple J is the driving force of that defense. All of these players are tremendous defenders. You can argue they're the best in the league, but I went with Bam just because of looking at what I want in a defensive player. He kind of checks all the boxes, even when I would say it's a down year for him as a rim protector. That's never necessarily been his game. I think with him, the way he can play at the level of screens, he can be a switch defender. Miami forces a ton of turnovers while not being too foul prone, and they are a good defensive rebounding team. I just think that kind of the 4 factors, the way they play defensively, that will always kind of be the driving force of their team. Even in a season where they're 25th in offense, it's like they're shooting on a double rim. They can't score at all, but they're kind of in that play-in, playoff mix still because of their defense. And I think that you look at the roster, especially with Lowry being injured and not quite the same player he was, Gabe Vincent playing a ton of minutes. Down the stretch, they even had Kevin Love starting at the 4. It's not exactly a team that's got great defensive personnel. And I think that I kind of want to just tip my hat to him for that. So I know that that's a pick that's not very popular, and he's got no shot of winning the award, but that's who I went with for my choice.
Yeah, interesting take there, and I kind of like that. I did. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of Bam love across the board, but I think he makes some really good points, and especially just kind of how shorthanded the Heat are and what a responsibility they were on Bam and Jimmy Butler. And similar to my point about Embiid, as far as like covering up for guys, Bam's in a similar situation where the guys like Gabe Vincent, Tyler Hero, Max Strus, like these aren't guys known for locking down other. So he does have that extra responsibility on him, and he's a guy who seems to want Defensive Player of the Year too, which I like that in a guy. I like them to care about the awards, want the accolades, want the recognition.
Definitely.
To me, that's a part of it, and I think that's cool. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be the year for Bam, but he deserves to be in that conversation. I've also has been surprised by the amount of Evan Mobley love. He's a terrific defender and a guy who's phenomenal for sure, but to me, I do think Jaren Jackson Jr. is the pick. I mean, 3.0 blocks per year, leading the NBA in blocks for the second consecutive season, in addition to 1.0 steal. And beyond just that, it's the presence that he has that to me jumps off the page. Like you see him deterring shots before guys even attempt it. That's one of the biggest things that I look out for is when there is that respect from opposing guys attacking the rim and things like that. That changes the game and changes the whole picture for opposing teams. So I do think Jaren Jackson is my pick for it. And I just love the way he defends. He's also able to switch out, do enough on guards to where he can't be a liability in anything. And the same point with Bam. And to me, that's very important for a big man as a defender is it can't be a guy that you can call a 1-5 switch, get a point guard on him and score. Like if that's the case, then like you're not a complete defender. I don't think Jaren Jackson Jr. is that guy. I've seen him do it. So that is my pick there. We can move on to Rookie of the Year. A little controversial kind of going up with this. I'll ask your point about the Walker Kessler vote after this. But first off, who is your pick for Rookie of the Year?
Well, this is probably the most slam dunk of the awards. I would say either this or Coach of the Year based on what I've been reading. But I went with Banchero and then Williams and Mathurin as my third pick. I think the discussion with the 2-3 and the Rookie of the Year is really interesting because I've seen Ivy love, I've seen Kessler love. I think that, even Keegan Murray, he's starting on a 3 seed as a rookie breaking the 3-point record, playing heavy minutes, a heavy role on not necessarily a contending team, but one of the best teams in the league over the regular season, playing big minutes, playoff team. That's incredible. Lots of guys playing really high-level basketball, but ultimately I went with Banchero. I know that there are guys who rate better in some of the catch-all metrics or impact metrics, however you want to phrase it, but I think that if you look at his role in the Magic, it's basically Franz Wagner and him are the driving force of their offense. And Fultz has done some good stuff too since he came off injury. He is the focal point of that team. I know that after a scorching hot start, he had that rough 1 of 33 month from three, but his ability to drive, get to the free throw line, and also he's a good passer. He can make kick out threes to his teammates. That's who I went with. It's the boring choice. I don't really have too much else to add about that.
Yeah, I ultimately caved and went with Banchero as well. It was tough for me to kind of hammer this one out. As much as it does seem universal across the board that he is the pick, it was to me harder than that just because of each of these guys' roles is so different and so unique. When you look around,
Yeah.
as you kind of mentioned, Banchero was for sure such a high usage guy, the driving force. But then there's guys that you could argue were incredibly successful in their role, like you mentioned with Keegan Murray's the first guy that pops on my mind. Benedict Mathurin, leading the NBA in scoring off the bench for most of the season, 16.7 points per game. I love Ben Mathurin's game and is a key point. Jalen Williams looking like a true kind of rising co-star to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So there's a lot to like from all these guys. I did lock in with Paolo and think just what he was asked to do, the high usage, the how much he had to create for himself and others was a little unique, and to me why he deserved it. And then I did want to ask about the Walker Kessler vote because I saw that going around Twitter of some people having
I
issues.
saw that too.
Yeah. Do you have any problem with it, or it is what it is?
I mean, I picked Bamford DPOY, so I know that I can also have some takes that folks would consider crazy. I think looking at it purely analytical, when you're evaluating a player or a team, I think that you should look through an analytical lens. You should kind of come at it two ways, like two
Yeah.
wings of a plane, film, analytics. And then you got to figure out how to combine those together to take flight and connect. And it should be something you use in addition to film and analytics. It's not either or, it's both. However, I think that just looking at it purely from a standpoint of analytics or even just purely from film, that would be misguided. So I think that Kessler is going to be an all-rookie first team. I haven't checked the voting on that actually, but I'm pretty certain that he'll make all-rookie first team. I think you can make a case for him being 2 or 3 on the ballot, but me personally, I tend to, for the rookie awards, I do tend to look at potential to some extent, at least with all rookie teams. For rookie of the year, I do try and stick to impact and kind of the talent of the player, but for all rookie teams, I do let some kind of projection come into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I personally don't have an issue with it. I think some people were critical because it was a Salt Lake City reporter that made the vote, calling out a little homerism or something like that. For me, Walker Kessler is a deserving enough candidate that I'm not throwing the red flag or waving it. I don't have him there, but I don't think Paolo is the straightforward unanimous decision. I think there's enough competition that I'm okay with it not being labeled as a unanimous. And I definitely think there is a case for Walker Kessler, especially if you view it from the lens of probably a guy who exceeded expectations more so than the others. Paolo was kind of expected to come in and dominate. Walker Kessler, not that there weren't high hopes because he was very good at Auburn and had some skills that were expected to translate, but I would say he's definitely got people's attention more. So overall, I think it's fair play and we move on. Moving on to next, the most improved, another one that seems kind of a runaway. Would you agree with kind of the public here, or who is your pick for most improved?
Who is the public pick? I didn't even check the voting for that.
I believe
Is
Laurie.
it SG? It's Laurie? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that Mark Cannon will probably win. First, I had SGA, and then third, I did SGA, Mark Cannon, and then Bridges third. I think that Mark Cannon probably made a bigger leap than SGA, but in recent seasons, I've kind of reverted to giving MIP to the player who makes the star leap, if that makes sense. So recent examples over the past few years would be Brandon Ingram in 1920, John Morant in seasons past. There's a couple other examples too, but this is kind of an award. I like it because there's so much room for interpretation.
Yeah.
Should it be a player who is quote unquote bad and becomes good, or should it be a player who is a starter on a good team like Laurie, gets traded and then has a total breakout that no one sees coming, or should it be a player who was Laurie was a lottery pick too, but SGA, he was highly regarded. He was kind of viewed as a blossoming star, but then he actually came through and followed through with all that quote unquote hype and delivered a shocking play-in berth, possibly playoff berth for the Thunder. So I think there's different ways you can look at it. MIP is one of my favorite awards because I think it rewards maybe a player who wouldn't get the same recognition because it's not necessarily going to an all-NBA player every year. It very well could go to a mid to low end all-star. So I think it's just awesome to reward guys who make a big jump because I feel typically when you get to the NBA, draft position is pretty sticky with the correlation of how good a player is. Everyone knows that you usually have to be picking at the top of the draft to land a star. So if a player comes out of nowhere or makes a huge jump into becoming a star player, I like that we can kind of nod and acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair, and I agree. I like that this award is up for interpretation a little bit, that people can go different directions with it. I'm going with Laurie. I personally just really like how he kind of found himself again. It feels like he had a little bit of a rocky stretch. He spent the time with the Bulls. He had the 1 year in Cleveland, and to kind of be given the keys and run with it this year in Utah has been awesome for me to see. Averaging 25.6 points, 8.6 rebounds, shooting 39.1% from three. His efficiency has been better this year. He cooled off a little bit towards the end of the year, but still just impressive overall. And SGA, I agree, is more than a fair candidate. I personally feel he kind of had his like arrival moment last year that to me he was.
That's definitely fair.
Yeah, to me, he was already like a guy in this league. And he's more than proving it. I mean, that victory over the Pelicans was awesome to watch, and seeing him taking center stage, I do think he's one of the true blossoming stars in the league. To me, I guess he's a little too good for the award in my mind, but definitely an argument for him for sure. And last up, we have Coach of the Year here. This one, like you've mentioned, pretty much the runaway. Is Mike Brown your choice here?
Yeah, I went with Mike Brown, and I had a note I wanted to make because I think the play-in game should count for end-of-season awards because the NBA doesn't want to put them in the regular season bucket, and they don't want to put them in the playoff bucket. And I was going through Basketball Reference looking at box scores, and I couldn't even find them like on the game logs for players. I'm like, seriously, what are we going to count these as? But I think they should count for postseason awards, because I went Mike Brown and then I went I went Taylor Jenkins, because I think that very quietly Triple J missed early part of the season. Ja obviously had the suspension. They've had the Clark injury, the Adams injury, and they're still humming along. 50-win season, 2 seeds, so I wanted to kind of hat tip that. And then third for me was between, I know that Doc's thing is he's going to coach a great regular season and his teams are seemingly always in contention, but then he's had some postseason blunders, so to speak. So 3 was between Doc and Dagnall for me. I want it to be after the play-in because I think that if the Thunder make the playoffs, that definitely changes the calculus of the award. I think that Mike Brown should win it no matter what, but like if you're comparing the 8 seed that wins 2 play-in games versus a 10 or 11 seed that gets eliminated, that's just kind of my all-encompassing rant. I know that it's not necessarily a big deal when you're talking about who would be third on your hypothetical Coach of the Year ballot, but that's just my kind of mini tangent on it. I don't have any points of contention. Mike Brown's going to win it. I saw that he won the coaches voting award version of that, so I assume it'll be a slam dunk with the media as well.
Yeah, I do think it's Mike Brown. I think you bring up some really good points, especially about the playing. And they were talking about that during the broadcast the other day, how it's like not a regular season thing. It doesn't count in the postseason. So it's just kind of like a whatever, just left open-ended right now. So that definitely needs to be something done about that. And I do lean toward it should be the postseason. I mean, regular season's over, so I feel like we're closer to that. I'll also give Will Hardy a little love. I agree with Taylor Jenkins too. I think he's been underrated as a coach so far through his Grizzlies tenure, and this year is probably the biggest evidence of that, of him overcoming that. I will give Will Hardy the nod at number 3 just for what he's done with the Jazz. Not that they didn't reach the goals that it seemed, but just watching that team on like as much as I on a regular basis, it's like they did some more impressive stuff than I expected from them. They competed on a night in and night out basis, and the development from a lot of those guys like Walker Kessler, like Laurie Markkinen was far above what I expected. But there's a lot of good candidates this year, and I do agree with your Doc Rivers point too. By the way, like as much as he is a point of contention among Sixers fans, I think he's done a really nice job this year for what he's done coaching wise. You can take some points off for the Tyrese Maxey stuff, throwing him on the bench for a little, maybe that not working, but overall it's been a good Doc year, and I do hope that continues to the playoffs. So yeah, that is our little wrap up for awards. We will switch over to the All NBA here. So another thing that I think there's a lot of controversy around. It feels like this year more than ever. So we'll start off with your first team. Who do you have for your All NBA first team?
So my first team, I made a mistake when I made my ballot on my initial tweet, and I realized that after I gave it some more thought and I talked to some people and I slept on it, thought about it overnight. Obviously, I don't actually have a vote. It's just for fun. But for my first team, I've said the past 2 seasons that you should try and get the first team All NBA to be the 5 best players, as close as possible to that as you can. And last year, people were like, you can't put Embiid on the first team because he's the second best center or whatever. I was like, who cares? I feel like history, I know it's a positional thing, but you want to kind of acknowledge a player being a top 3 to 5 player in the league. That's just my personal opinion. So I've tried to finagle my All NBA teams when I can to include the 5 players I want. When I did that this year, I counted Tatum and Butler as guards. So that made my All NBA choices for the guards kind of condensed. And I realized that after I did that, and I included Kawhi Leonard as a front court player, so I had an extra front court spot, so I included Kawhi, but I took away a spot from the guards because I double counted some players at the guard spot. I realized that I was really shortchanging SGA, so I corrected that mistake. But my first team is Embiid, Jokic, Giannis, Tatum, and Butler. People probably aren't going to agree with me counting Jokic as a forward and Butler and Tatum as guards. That's just how I wanted to do it, just get the 5 players who I thought were as close as possible to top 5 players this season. And I don't know. Like, I think All NBA, it's tricky because this year in particular, I didn't know how to weigh someone like Durant only playing 47 games versus Julius Randle. I think he played 77. I think it comes down to just preference. Typically on the first team, I do like to have a pretty strict kind of games played thing, at least like 65-ish, give or take. But if you get to second and third team, I am more open to including players who missed a substantial portion of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, all great points. I do agree with you on the positional stuff. It's frustrated me the last couple of years, especially because like if we just look at this from a basketball perspective, like there's no reason Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic couldn't play together. Like they absolutely could share the floor.
I think it'd be a great duo, honestly. I feel like Embiid would cover a lot of Jokic's deficiencies, and I think that Jokic entry pass and high lows to Embiid would be awesome.
Yeah, no, it absolutely would. We got a little look at it in the All-Star game, but yeah, that to me is like the number one reason why it's nonsense. Like if you want to call it the positions thing, like let's just look at this. Like these guys definitely could play together. So there's too much caught up with it. I did stick by the books just because of how it's been done like that, and Embiid getting the second team these past couple years. So I did lock in with just one. So as far as my first team, I do have Joel Embiid, Giannis, Jason Tatum, and I have SGA and De'Aaron Fox rounded out my guard spots here.
I like the Fox pick. That's nice.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of what De'Aaron Fox has done this year. I mean, leading the NBA in clutch time buckets, a guy that's just been the driving force and motor of that Kings team. And I'm becoming like a part-time Kings fan throughout the season, just watching them play. I love the joy the team plays with, the light, the beam. Sabonis has been awesome. I have him on here too. We'll get to that. But yeah, I do think Fox deserves some recognition, SGA as well. And yeah, I when these kind of rules officially change, and my personal kind of opinion on what it should be is just straight up front court and back court is the way that I would kind of sort out. I would even go like 2-2 and a flex to make it like as open ended as possible. But yeah, for this year, as the rules are, I did lock in with just Embiid at the 1. Who do you have for your second team?
Second team is Sabonis, LeBron. I counted Luka as a forward, and then Steph and Donovan Mitchell. And
Good.
this one was tricky because I try and separate team success from a player's impact, but I also want to reward the players who are on winning teams because that kind of captures the not narrative of the season, but what actually happens during the season. So I was kind of at a dilemma on what to do with Luka and Lillard in comparison to guys like Donovan Mitchell, who's on a 4 seed, who won 50 games.
Mhm.
And then Kevin Durant, who I initially had on my second team, I dropped him to third team because it's pretty crazy to have someone with 47 games on All NBA, almost purely just based on half a season of play. So that was one of the most difficult aspects of it. I do kind of like how I ended up having Sabonis. The good thing about me putting Jokic on first team is I get to put Sabonis on second team and kind of shout that season because the Kings, they were a team who I thought would be in the play-in mix a lot like the Thunder this year. But if you would have told me they were the 3 seed, I would have fell over in my chair.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly confident Sabonis will make All NBA, and Fox also has a chance. So to see them have 2 players possibly be acknowledged as top 15 players in the league, that's just incredible.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I like that list too. And I also had a really tough time with the games played this year more than ever. And even look at MVP, like none of these guys, the top 3, as far as Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid, none of them eclipsed 70 games this season. So
Yeah.
it is more open-ended than ever. And I did kind of lean toward the like judging when they're on the court more than I'm not a big availability is the best availability guy. I would
hmm
prefer a guy to when he's there be dominant rather than just be there and be pretty good all the time. So looking at my second team, obviously I have Jokic for not being on the first. Then I did give the nod to Anthony Davis. He played 56 games this year, averaged 25.9 points, 12.5 rebounds. I'm not an Anthony Davis guy in general. I've kind of been he's been overrated for most of his career, but I really liked what he did this year. I thought defensively he's been very good. Him commanding the boards and just kind of taking that more personally this year is a big deal for this Lakers team. And especially with how hectic it's been throughout the season for everything there. Like, I think he's done a really good job of holding down the fort while LeBron's missed time, while they've made all these trades. So I think Anthony Davis has had an underrated year this season, and I did give him that. I also, or you dropped Kevin Durant to third. I have Kevin Durant on my second team. I battled with this as well. I mean, 47 games is not a lot, but he was so ridiculous in those 47 games, and some of the shooting efficiency numbers are just unreal. The
Yeah, it's
mid-range
incredible.
stats, yeah, the mid-range stats, like he blows everyone in the NBA out the water with just how efficient he is, and to just be doing it at such a high level across whatever team he's on, it does impress me. So I did give Kevin Durant, and then I rounded out with Donovan Mitchell and Luka. Moving on to number 3. You want to hit me with your all NBA third team here?
So, not to spoil it, did you have LeBron on third team?
I did not. I did leave
You did
LeBron
not?
off.
Okay, so a debate for me was who to put on which team for the 2 Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me thinks that the Lakers have always been a great defensive team through the past 4 years, almost irregardless of who's on the court, as long as Davis is in. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought, should I put Davis on second team or should I put LeBron for being the guard and driving force of that unit? You can say that there's been other players like D'Lo, obviously incorporated post trade. Austin Reeves is getting more ball handling responsibilities, but I kind of view LeBron as that team's primary initiator. So I went with LeBron on the second team, Davis on the third team. Um, the third team front court spot that gave me the most trouble was I was debating Bam, Jaylen Brown, and Julius Randle.
Mm-hmm.
Some would put in Pascal Siakam. I tried to limit it to those 3 guys I just mentioned, but he's also deserving of a shout. I went with Bam because, again, I had him as DPOY. I feel like given how prominent a role he plays in the dribble handoffs in their offense and what he does in the short roll, I think based on my criteria, he had to be on the third team All NBA. And then for the last 3 spots, I went with, obviously Durant, who I said I dropped, and then, SGA and Lillard, sorry.
Gotcha.
Had a
Yeah.
typo. So this was tricky for me. Again, why I want postseason award voting to take place after the play-in games, just so I can have that kind of set in stone element to it, how I can differentiate a 10 seed who ends up qualifying for the playoffs versus a 12 seed who shuts down players at the end of March. That's really tricky for me. You could argue I think SGA is probably going to make first team All NBA. You could also argue Lillard should make it too.
Yeah.
It's really tricky because Lillard's probably been a top 8 player this year. How do you weigh that versus Portland's kind of fizzling out? And then SGA, like I said, my initial tweet and ballot was a mistake. I shouldn't have done, the compounding of the positions the way I did. So he has to be an All NBA third team for me.
Yeah, Lillard's one I had a tough with too. I ended up leaving him off all 3 teams, mainly due to, Portland. I had high expectations for Portland this year. I really thought that, not that they were championship contenders or whatever, they're very much in the NBA purgatory kind of category, but they started the year hot, and I kind of had optimism they would at least be in the conversation for playoffs, and it was frustrating how much that took a turn, and saw him sitting out by the end of the year. We're going to continually see the Dame Lillard headlines, but yeah, I did end up leaving him off my all 3 of my NBA teams. But as far as who I did have for 3, at center, I have Domantas Sabonis. I mean, I can't say he's awesome. I love watching him play. He is exceeding all my expectations. The dribble handoffs are awesome. All the movement, all the things he does. So definitely a deserving candidate there. I did give Lauri Markkanen some love as the power forward spot. I was torn between him.
I like that.
Yeah, I was torn
I
between
thought the Jazz would win 20 games, and they almost won. They won 36 or 37. What was it?
Yeah, I think 36. But yeah. So I do give Lauri the love. I was torn between him and Julius Randle for that spot, but I ended up going with Lauri. And then my other 3, I have Jaylen Brown, Anthony Edwards, and Jalen Brunson. I gave love to for the
Hey, I
last
like
part.
Anthony Edwards' pick. I wanted to do it as a Timberwolves fan, but I just decided I try not to be too kind of biased with my picks. But I think he has a case, especially with how much he plays and the prominence of his role and how they stayed in the hunt with Cat being hurt. But I like those picks a lot, man.
Yeah, and that's totally what swayed me on Edwards is, number one, the strides forward he's taken defensively this year is awesome. Like, he is taking it personal now. Like, you can see him like being into it on the defensive side of the floor, which is great. Like, he's developing into one of the like premier 2-way talents. I love Anthony Edwards, his game, his personality, everything about him. And yeah, like you said, like him being able to keep that team afloat while Cat's injured, while Rudy Gobert has not quite clicked in the way that everything has hoped. So yeah, I give Edwards a lot of respect and one of my just favorite players to watch around the NBA for sure. Jackson, to wrap things up, let everybody know where they can find you at, what you got going on.
So on Twitter, I'm Jackson Lloyd, obviously, and then at Jackson Lloyd NBA. I also write for Roll Call Sports on occasion, not so much in the past year or so. And then I have the NBA Action with Jackson podcast at NBA Action Pod. Again, kind of on little hiatus, just focusing on school and work and all that fun stuff. But lots of basketball talk on Twitter. It's my main hobby. I'm addicted to it, and I'm really excited. This is, other than the beginning of the season, kind of Christmas time, and then those are the best times to be NBA fans, and we're just going to get so much great ball over the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jackson, I appreciate you for hopping on for me. Everybody, thank you for watching. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already, and I'll be back with you hopefully with some good news after the opening games of the playoffs. So talk soon.